When they told Mordecai what Esther had said, Mordecai told them to reply to Esther, "Do not think that in the king's palace you will escape any more than all the other Jews. For if you keep silent at such a time as this, relief and deliverance will rise from the Jews from another quarter. But you and your father's family will perish. Who knows? Perhaps you have come to royal dignity for just such a time as this." Then Esther replied to Mordecai, "Go and gather all the Jews to be found in Susa and hold a fast on my behalf, and neither eat nor drink for 3 days and 3 nights. And my maids and I will fast also, as you do. And after that I will go to the king, though it is against the law, and yet if I perish, I perish." Mordecai then went away and did everything Esther had ordered him.
As we've been walking through our journey through the Bible, kind of our chronological walk, we talked about how we start out with this prehistory of creation and the flood, but then we start to pick up a relational history in the family of Abraham. They eventually find themselves as 12 brothers living in Egypt. They expand into 12 tribes, which find themselves enslaved in Egypt. They come out with Moses. They build a kingdom with Saul and David and then Solomon. And then the kingdom divides. The northern kingdom gets conquered. The southern kingdom of Judah continues to live on until Babylon comes and destroys the walls, the temple, and takes a quarter of the community's leadership, wealthy, creative, and spiritual folks into exile. And this is one of those stories from beyond in the exile time. The Psalms, we get some of the poetry from that time. Lamentations and other things, we get wisdom literature inspired by it, but we only get so many stories from what happened to those who were in exile. Over the next couple of weeks, we'll talk about them returning as well and what that was like. But this story happens in a faraway place. The story is not clean as we would like it to be. It's told through oral tradition, multiple ways combined and kind of polished into one final piece in the book of Esther. But along with Daniel, Radshak, Meshach, and Abednego, and Esther, those are really our big glimpses into life in exile. We get a little bit from Ezekiel and some of the prophets who also went away, but they're not telling story. They're just lamenting. Esther gives us an experience of the Jewish community. These are people who are very competent who get taken away, and they're not enslaved, they're just displaced. They're asked to contribute to society. Babylon doesn't want to punish them, they want to take advantage of them. They want their gifts to blend into the community. And so they are doing their best, but they are clearly still outsiders when we get to this story. The king has lost his queen when Esther begins. The queen dared to not come when summoned and acted like she was a woman with her own rights. She was exiled, and all the other noblemen come to the king and say, one, you have to get a new queen, but two, you have to make sure this one knows her place. Otherwise, all us men are in trouble. Our wives will start expecting equality, and then what will happen in the world? So there's a beauty pageant held, as for any wife selection, right? And the winner is Esther. At no point did they ask for her demographic background. They just said, she looks hot, let's let her be queen. Mordecai is Esther's guardian, an older cousin, we think. Mordecai has connections. He listens to things. He's built relationships. And he hears about a plot to assassinate the king. He goes to Esther, who informs the king, and the king is saved. Mordecai's name gets written in the book of the king. It's recorded with the head of the guard that this man performed a service to the king. He should be honored. At no point in here do we care that Esther and Mordecai are Jewish. That's when Haman comes into the story. Haman rises up among the ranks of advisors to the king. The Jewish community talks about him having a funny hat. So I imagine him as Jafar from Aladdin. Big funny hat, second in command, and really wants to be in charge, right? I also assume he has a talking parrot that sounds like Gilbert Godfrey, but that's not in the scriptures. Haman has some inadequacy issues. He likes to be praised. Part of his being in authority isn't to help people, it's to get praise. And so, as a representative of the king, he tells other people they should show their support for the king by genuflecting to him. And as he's going down the town, he expects people to bow and appreciate someone representing the king. And Mordecai doesn't, because Mordecai only bows for God. Haman takes it as an offense against the entire leadership structure, against the king and the kingdom. He tells the king about half the story, about how people out there are disrespecting him and their authority, and how it might lead to revolution. The king gives Haman permission to deal with these troublemakers without really even knowing who the troublemakers are. Mordecai and the Jewish community hear that Haman's order to have all the Jews killed has gone out, that gallows will be constructed. Mordecai goes to Esther and says, "You have to speak to the king." And Esther says, "The last person who told the king when they would and would not come was banished. Queen Vashti's never been heard from again. I could die. That is the punishment for addressing the king without permission. The last time I did it was to save the king's life. I was confident. This one has nothing to do with saving the king's life. I'm probably going to die." And then we get the scripture that Jessica read today and Mordecai saying, "Do you really think as hate ripples through, as Haman starts killing all the Jewish people, do you think he will keep you safe being in the palace? They'll find out who you are." Maybe, Mordecai says, you were brought to this place for such a time as this. Mordecai also says, "And I trust God will deliver us from this tragedy one way or another. And if you don't, someone else will rise up. So would you please step up so our family can have the honor in history?" There's some faithfulness, some belief, some completely irrational confidence in Mordecai. Esther agrees. She asks before she goes to the king, she asks Mordecai and all the Jewish people to fast for 3 days and be in prayer for her. She asks her maids and servants to do the same. Eventually, Esther goes to the king. The king does like her a lot. The king welcomes her, hears her voice, and she exposes Haman's plot. Haman ends up hanging on the gallows that he constructed for the Jews, and everyone else lived happily ever after. Of course, Haman, because he died. The end. No problems ethically in this story, right? The telling of the story is one thing, but the other is the reason it gets told. We always ask, why did grandma pass this story down in the oral tradition? Why did it later get written down? Probably for such a time as this. Esther was the right person at the right place at the right time. So often, this makes a difference. The right person at the right place at the right time. We know it can go the other way as well, right? You can be the wrong person in the wrong place at the wrong time. But on occasion, God finds the right person in the right place at the right time. We talked about this with Moses. He was raised in Pharaoh's court. He was a Hebrew person. Who better than to get sent back to take the people out of slavery than Moses? Right person, right place, right time. A few thousand years later, after Moses, I was driving a church van to camp. I was taking campers and dropping them off. I know they were young campers because I had no interest in staying with them. That's how I roll at camp. It was my home camp back in Kentucky where I had grown up as a kid, and I did always like taking the kids, seeing the grounds that meant so much to me, tucking them in, and then again, if they were like fifth grade and younger, leaving so somebody else had to deal with all that energy. All those questions, all the, can you take me to the bathroom? I'm a big junior high and high school guy. The catch is, this trip to camp was a little different. It was probably the worst week of my life. I had not had my diagnosis of ADHD yet, and I seriously lacked self-awareness. Things had been unraveling in my life all around me. I was discovering how much I had hurt so many who were close to me. I was realizing how fragile my own future had become and how much work I had to do to get my life in order. But at this point, I felt so alone. I got the camper squared away and lamented being sad in a place where I had experienced so much joy. I lamented being confused about how to express my emotions and stay guarded as people asked, "Hey, how you doing? Good to see you." In a place where I'd always shared my feelings and my heart so freely. Then Bish showed up. Reverend Larry Bishop had been one of my camp leaders as a youth and was a mentor in my ministry. Ironically, they were doing a celebration of his service and ministry as a surprise with campers from 4 decades showing up at his little congregation in Kentucky this morning. They will have met about 2 hours ago by the time change and be at a picnic as I'm preaching now. I had listened to Bish as my keynoter all through high school camps. We'd kicked the soccer ball around together for years. We'd counseled together at this point. I asked him why he was there, and he said, "Oh, you know." I said, "Seriously, you're the senior minister of a fairly large congregation. There's no parents, there's no youth sponsors. You've got a youth minister. They're all unavailable today." He said, "I just missed camp, so I thought I'd come on down." He and I took a walk along one of the trails, and as it became just the two of us, he looked and he said, "So how are you doing?" And I fell apart. He caught me in his arms, he held me, he hugged me, he listened to me. I have no idea why he thought he was going to camp that morning. That he was the right person in the right place at the right time. Along the journey, you may have had one of these moments yourself. The weight of the world on your shoulders, fear of what's coming, swimming around you, confusion about what next steps you should take, when all of a sudden, the right person in the right place at the right time. Along the journey, you may have seen one of these moments from the other side too. You may not have been prepared to be a hero that day. You may not have been expecting a serious moment out of an encounter. You may not have been aware of what God was up to you and what God was sending your way, when all of a sudden you became the right person, the right place, and at the right time. At our best, when these moments come, we roll with it, right? We roll with it, we let God lead the way, and we save the day. But not always. Sometimes we dismiss the moment. We don't think we are able enough. We don't think we're capable. We don't think we're worthy of the responsibility. Too often we miss the opportunity because we think the moment's too big for us. Surely I couldn't be the one to do that. That would be somebody else who fills those roles. Too often we only see it in hindsight. What could have been, if only. If only. Esther had to have the same feelings, right? She had to have the same feelings. Fear of what would happen to her. Fear of what if she failed, of not making a difference. What does that do to your heart when you try and you don't succeed? And in this, lives were on the line. Esther has these same feelings, too much pressure, too little confidence. Sure, she won a global beauty pageant, but all she had to do was look pretty, smile, and wave. This is real. This is life or death, not just for other people, but for her personally. This is affecting her people for generations. Esther has to have the same feelings, not seeing herself as a hero, not seeing as herself as the one to save the day. That was Mordecai. Mordecai's the hero. He's the older one, the one that protects her, that cares for her. He's the right person at the right place and right time in her life, in the king's life even. He's the one that's supposed to save the day. Why is it her? That's what the leaders of the past did. That's what the people in the stories did. That's what somebody on the news did. It's not her. But Esther becomes the right person at the right place at the right time. But she had to have been asking, could that really be me? Could that really be me? She had to wonder if it could really be done. And it had to be frightening. Frightening. Maybe you've been there. Of course, Esther was not alone. She found courage, she found words, and she found a path forward. But she also had Mordecai coaching her, inspiring her. She had servants who worked with her, conspired with her in her getting the audience with the king. I kind of simplified the story. It's a whole elaborate plot. It could be a daytime soap opera. She had people praying and fasting with her, standing in solidarity with her for the task ahead. She found the courage, she found the words, she found a path forward through her fear and doubts, a path through the anxiety and insecurity, a path for her and her people. She was the right person at the right place in the right time. The combination of opportunity and courage, of ability and availability. It's a mix of so many things, and it can happen to us all. Now, you may not be a beauty queen, but someone might be expecting you to lead. You might not have the ear of kings and leaders, but someone might desperately need you to listen. You might not have an entire nation praying for you, but maybe someone will expect your prayer to be the one that makes the difference. And it can happen to us all. A moment such as this, as we listen to our joys and concerns this morning, a moment such as these, as we watch the news, a time such as this, as you look at the own events in your life, what's going on with you, what's going on with those you love, a time such as this. There are so many cliches that go with this concept. Don't watch the pitch go by. Have the courage to enter an open door. Player down means next one up, right? But my favorite comes from Hamilton. The expression of confidence in the moment, a realization that there is a moment and it's significant and there's a choice to be made. And I am not throwing away my shot. You all know the lyric? I'm not throwing away. I'm not throwing away. Can you imagine Esther thinking through her situation? Can you imagine her contemplating Mordecai's words, looking at everything around her, figuring out what she wants to do in the moment? Can you imagine the moment where Esther stands up from whatever comfy place that queens get to lounge and says, I am not throwing away? Can you imagine the next time you have a chance to change someone's life? Can you imagine the next unexpected opportunity where you are the right person at the right place and the right time, and in your mind, you're thinking, I'm not going to miss this pitch. I'm going to rise to the occasion. But what's really going through our head is, I'm not throwing away. When someone quotes the Bible to condemn someone else, I am not throwing away my shot. When someone opens up and shares their heart with you and you choose how to respond, I am not throwing away. When someone falls into your arms in tears, I am not throwing away. When someone seeks forgiveness, asks the big question, invites you to lead, asks what you think, tries to pin people's crap on God, when someone tries to excuse people's crap with patriotism or claims that they are not a lovable person, and you have the chance to respond, we are not throwing away our shot. That is the call of the church. That's why Grandma told the story of Esther, so we would not throw away our shot. Amen.